The White Sox bats fall silent in Cleveland. 3 runs in 3 games. Today on Locked On White Sox, dissecting this sudden offensive drought.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, the White Sox lineup got shackled by Cleveland this weekend, and let's discuss the series being another reminder the club has a long way to go offensively to get back to being competitive. Then Sean Burke understands tonight's outing is a huge one for him. And finally, I'll get to the weekly Minor League Monday report. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. All right, so there's no sugarcoating this one. The offense did nothing in Cleveland over the weekend. Absolutely zero zilch. In fact, in one game, they did zilch because they got shut out. And it's not like the Guardians mashed the ball either. And the Sox had the chance to win all 3 games, in theory. Except for Tanner Bybee just absolutely, going old school Greg Maddux. But every game was there for the taking, and yet the offense got completely neutralized. And while things have gone well in the second half of the season offensively, getting swept in Cleveland served as a big old bucket of cold water on the dreams that, hey, maybe the White Sox actually are not too far away. Although I got a guest on tomorrow's show that's going to make the case that if a stellar offseason happens, well, maybe things could be closer to being competitive than we think. Although don't worry, the guest that I have on tomorrow, he realizes it's not going to happen in terms of a stellar offseason. In fact, that's kind of the premise of the show, why you should be excited for what's going on, but then also be prepared for a basically disappointing off season. But this series sweep served as a reminder that I think you and I were hoping that we would no longer get any reminders the rest of the way that this was going to be an extensive rebuild. Well, there's going to be reminders. It's still a massive, extensive rebuild. And I've even, every day, as you might recall, I've described this more as a build for how far the White Sox have fallen. I mean, you're not rebuilding from winning the 2021 AL Central Division. You're building back up from having the historically worst record of all time. And yes, it is all time. When you lose 121 games in the year of our Lord 2024, that's all time because you have these things called like technology, scouting, data, analytics, money. And the White Sox did none of that and had the worst season ever. And one of the reminders that we're going to get that this is still an extensive rebuild, that talent still has to be added, even though we're seeing this young core emerge, is not everything is going to sync up for long stretches of time. That's why these rebuilds can be painful, because for short spurts, everything syncs up and you're like, I see it. Better days are here. They're going to happen. And then it's like, oh, that's right. There's still a little bit more ways to go. Because, if the offense is clicking, you've seen the bullpen then completely fall apart. And then if the bullpen is actually doing well for a spurt, the defense or the starting pitching isn't there. It just keeps showing you, man, more talent's got to be added to grow basically the team's margin for error. Because that's one of the things a good talent base gives you. You have a margin for error. Look at the Dodgers. They're having a terrible second half, but they're still going to make the playoffs because of the talent that they have. That spotted them a pretty good start, and they're able to make the playoffs. I mean, look at the Cubs. Everybody's freaking out about the Cubs on the north side. I want to be like, they still have the talent in a short series in October, and it pains me to say it, but in a couple short series in October to win those series and to win the whole thing. They've still got the talent there. It's still there. So what you're doing is you're seeing that more talent has to be added to basically increase your margin for error. And then you also then try to win on the margins, kind of one of those contradictory statements. But maybe on the flip side, you don't have to be, so specific that everything has to go specifically right and match up and sync up to consistently win. Like, you could potentially win games if your offense is sputtering a little bit. Or on the flip side, if your starting pitching is starting to get gassed, you should have enough talent, and more talent needs to be added to the lineup to overcome a tired off pitching staff. And think about this too. I mean, Cleveland just had the White Sox number this season. The White Sox won 2 games against the Guardians and none in Cleveland. The Guardians are just a bad matchup for the White Sox, and they kind of have to figure that out, because this is a team that you have to play 13 times. Because when you're constructing rosters, obviously you should construct it to where you play 81 games, your home ballpark. But then you also got to figure out, hey, how do we also beat the teams that we got to play 13 times, our division, to kind of make up that math, because you're not going to win every game at home. So, but they are just a bad matchup for the White Sox, because the Guardians pitch well and play defense well enough to really make it hard to pound out runs, at least for the White Sox. Because the White Sox produced just 3 runs in 27 innings. And technically, it was a run over an 18-inning stretch. A run. I mean, they got beat old school by Tanner Bybee. Yeah, Tanner Bybee, not Tyler. I always get him mixed up, but yeah, by Bybee. I mean, because he throws a complete game shutout where he allowed just 2 hits. 2! Complete game shutout, 2 hits. And what's weird, too, is the Guardians, I mean, they pitch well, but they will still allow guys to get on base. They actually minimize the traffic on the base paths for the White Sox in 2 of the 3 games. And that's something, obviously, the White Sox are trying to do more of this season, get guys on base. I mean, you're seeing the vision of what what Chris Getz and Will Venable think will produce more runs. Just old school money ball, get guys on base, hit the ball over the fence, hit those 3-run homers. But what they got to do to counter it is, if the ball isn't going over the fence, and it didn't for a 3-game stretch until Chase Maidroth goes yard, that's slugger Chase Maidroth, you got to then come up with those timely hits. And that's the thing that they got to figure out, especially against Cleveland, because why it's weird that Cleveland minimized the traffic is they're 17th in the league in whip. And the Sox managed just 3 base runners on Friday on 2 hits and reaching on an error. And on Sunday, 5 hits and 1 walk. That's just not going to get it done. It's not going to cut it for the Pal Hose to be successful, because, again, traffic on base, get them in with home runs. But then the next thing they got to do is to evolve is they got to get those timely hits. Because Chase Maidroth, for example, he was like the lone bright spot on offense this weekend with a hit in each one. But Colson Montgomery, he reminded us of his weakness in his game, and that's striking out, and he had 4 strikeouts. Kyle Teal, he also looked like a rookie too, and that's why this is still going to take a little bit of time. These guys still need to get the experience of, for example, coming up with the timely hits. Kyle Teal, just 1 hit and 3 strikeouts. So, it served as a reminder that more talent has to be infused, more experience has to be gained in these runners in scoring position situations, becoming more clutch, that type of stuff. And if that does happen, then, maybe the White Sox can not only match up with Cleveland well, but with the rest of the league over, more duration of time, not just these short spurts. Well, speaking of development, pitcher Sean Burke is hoping this is his worst season in hopefully a long story career. And let's discuss why. Even he acknowledges tonight is a big outing for him after the break. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I keep telling you, FanDuel's traditional money lines, spreads, and over-unders, they're fun to play. But if you want to hit it big, or at least double or triple your money, play FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures. So, for example, in tonight's Tampa versus Houston game, if you think Tampa will score a touchdown on its first drive, That is at plus 360. So there's a chance to triple your money if it hits. Houston scoring a touchdown on its first drive is at plus 290 the last time I checked. So once again, a chance to nearly triple your money if it hits. And if you want to parlay that, you can do that into a 2-leg same game parlay. That is at plus 1343. So say you put $10 on that and it hits. If it does hit, that's going to pay out $134.38. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. It's very simple. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. And again, I love how simple and easy of a concept this is. And, they run, specials or promos like Taco Tuesdays where no, you don't get a taco. Instead, Taco Tuesday consists of several discounted player projections on the board marked with tacos, meaning with the more or less is down from what PrizePicks originally has available. So basically a discounted player projection. And they're also running a max discount for next Sunday's game with more or less on Patrick Mahomes passing yards being at 0.5. That's right, 0.5. So basically, he completes one positive pass, boom, you're almost there toward cashing in. Because again, you got to get 2 to 6 player projection stats right. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And also make sure to turn on the notifications. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope along the way. Because again, better days might just be around the corner there. Well, at least Sean Burke is self-aware. He is self-aware that this season has not gone well after it looked so promising for him. I mean, he goes from dominating on opening day. And remember, he was the opening day starter after only making 4 career starts last year. 4. That's all he had to his name. And he goes out and he dominates the Angels. And he goes from there to getting demoted on August 18th. Now, obviously, he's back. And I talked about it on last week. Show. I think it was Wednesday during his last outing. Wasn't the exactly thrilling. Hey, this guy's back. It's a good thing he went down to AAA and worked some things because he was very shaky. But he knows he's got to make the most of his opportunity to prove he should be a leader in the clubhouse for the rotation spot. Competition that's going to happen next year's spring training. Because right now, you can basically only, I would even say, you could Sharpie in Shane Smith and Davis Martin. That's it. Those are the guys that you can say for sure they should be in the starting rotation. Shane Smith is probably your opening day starter. And as long as they don't make some surprise trade with Davis Martin, he's going to be in your rotation as well. But otherwise, you got 3 spots open. And I've always said too, you probably want to have a veteran pitcher still. So whether you're bringing back Martin Perez, depending on, I don't bring him back on that $10 million option, but maybe you can get him, you buy him out at 1.5. So that way he makes $5 million. Maybe you just guarantee him $5 million for next year. Because I think he's done enough to maybe want to bring back. He's a very good clubhouse leader. But again, you don't want to be paying him $10 million because if he does, if he is in the twilight of his career and it shows early, or, again, he gets hurt like this year, you don't want to be on the hook for $10 million. You can handle making him go away for 3.5, for example. So maybe something like 7 or an incentive laden deal on that. But either way, you need to add a veteran pitcher, and you might have to add a couple because while Drew Thorpe and Kai Bush are going to be coming back and Mason Adams from Tommy John surgery, you don't know what they're going to bring to the table. Maybe Shane Murphy can come out of nowhere. And don't forget, the White Sox are still going to have a very good pick in the Rule 5 draft. So do you go back in trying to find another Shane Smith? Because you'll be able to find that guy potentially. I wouldn't expect it to be an all-star, but maybe you find another starting pitcher there. But either way, you want to see Sean Burke pitch well enough to be like, yeah, he's a leader in the clubhouse going into this competition in spring training. And he's going to get another opportunity to show that he deserves to be probably one of the leaders for a rotation spot next year. Although he is getting spotted in an opener in Tyler Gilbert. And why I'm bringing him up is he made some observations in pregame. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Either way, Chicago Sun-Times, Kyle Williams, and SoxMachine.com's James Fegans have two excellent pieces. So again, make sure you're subscribing to the Sun-Times and make sure you get a subscription to SoxMachine.com because they all do excellent work. And I wanted to share kind of some of that work with you for a couple reasons. The first is Burke sounds like a guy that's willing to share the pains it takes to develop into a pitcher at the big league level. And development's not linear. It's not like, oh my gosh, Shane Smith just came out of nowhere and then he kind of cooled off, but then he's back to being awesome again. Or like, hey, this guy's going to be great, like Cade Horton, right away. It takes a little bit sometimes for guys. And then I really like how he's aiming to make sure that when we look back at his career, that we look back at he has a good one and that this season was just basically an anomaly. So here's some snippets from Williams' piece in the Sun-Times that I want to share. White Sox right-hander Sean Burke hopes this season is the worst of his major league career. Quote, "This is ideally my worst year in the league," end quote, he told the Sun-Times. Burke entered the season after a strong September call-up last year, during which he posted a 1.42 ERA in 4 outings that covered 19 innings. After throwing a scoreless outing on opening day against the Angels, Burke was inconsistent. Command became an issue as he struggled to find the strike zone and put batters away. Those lengthy at-bats ratcheted up his pitch count, leading to abbreviated starts. He had 42 strikeouts and 31 walks over April and May. Burke adjusted and his strikeout numbers rose, but hitters' propensity to foul off his pitches became unattendable. He was continually taxing the bullpen with short stints. In 3 August starts, Burke never pitched more than 5 innings, and he was demoted to AAA Charlotte. I'm just going to skip ahead really quick. Early in the season, Burke was throwing too many non-competitive pitches. When hitters got ahead in the count, they usually had success. When Burke is behind in the count, he's walking hitters at a 27.8% rate, with just a 10.7% strikeout rate. He has the stuff to succeed, but it's all about harnessing it. And then skipping a little bit ahead, quote, "I need to understand that when I'm at my best and I'm doing what I can do, I can beat anybody," Burke said. So taking that mindset into it and having the confidence that I'm able to do that and repeating that week in and week out over the course of the season is what separates the really great pitchers from the guys that aren't as consistent, end quote. And I think he hits the nail on the head, even Sean Burke himself. It's got to be more consistent. And it's also got to be the stuff, too, that if you get behind an account, he's got to be able to battle back and get outs. And that's something that I think I've even missed. That, oh, my gosh, when he gets behind an account, it's almost certain he's going to walk a guy. I mean, fight back, young man, fight back. Then Fegan's piece adds to a pitcher who went from ultra confident to being humbled. And, again, he's trying to figure out when to mix in certain pitches. Here's what Fegan writes. Sean Burke's return to the White Sox rotation didn't quite have the fanfare of his opening day start. It was announced with a roster move alongside Dan Altavila's DFA rather than a social media graphic. At this point, even Burke was more inclined to treat it as another turn in the journey than a triumph. Quote, "I've had times where I thought I'm the best pitcher on earth, and I've had times where I thought I'm the worst pitcher on earth. So just trying to find that middle ground and keeping the belief in myself," Burke said. "Just knowing that when I'm healthy, I have the ability to do what I want to do. It's been kind of a roller coaster, but I don't think the belief level has changed," end quote. And then I'm just going to skip ahead. Burke's velocity was more noticeable in port from his time in Charlotte, less so the changeup that looked effective in his last AAA start. But alongside renewed confidence in his command, Burke is sounding pretty comfortable with the idea that his changeup stands ready to clear up the inefficiency issues with his fastball, curveball attack has been having with left-handers, compared to the hesitancy to insist upon it when he first arrived in Charlotte. To provide an example of what he means by that, when asked about throwing in the changeup 3 times Wednesday, Burke replied readily, quote, "I use it the perfect amount," end quote. And kind of what he was talking about is it's just, he should start to mix in his changeup just to kind of counter, but it shouldn't be like his bread and butter. Like, hey, I got to mix it in for the sake of mixing it in. It sounds like, subscribing to what pitching director Brian Bannister is preaching. Throw your best pitches as much as possible, but sometimes you just need to mix in that little, that pitch that can throw some guys off kilter. So let's hope he can, be solid, be that number 3 pitcher in the big leagues, but he's got to, consistently harness his stuff. In terms of somebody that could be helpful in the big league, Sam Antonacci could someday be an effective leadoff hitter. Let's discuss on this week's Minor League Monday Report after the break. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There's so many products out there, and it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything, and that's why you should give Nutrafol a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplement clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. And I know I got some hair issues, so you best believe I'm going to be giving Nutrafol a try. And I can feel good about giving them a try knowing Nutrafol is NSF certified and backed by peer-reviewed studies. See thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. And for a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts. This show is available on all major podcast platforms. And hope you had a good weekend. Mine, again, rather low key. I did take my wife and daughter to go see The Sound of Music. It was a 60th anniversary screening that I know Marcus Theaters was having. So I took them, but it was during the Bears game. And I decided, okay, I'm going to be in the code of silence because I can record the game. You know, I can just pretend that I watched it live as I record it. So turned off my phone, kept all my notifications off, told the guys on the text chain, I'm in the code of silence. So by the time I watched the game, I think it was at 6, I probably should have just checked. I should have saved myself. I mean, the nice thing was I was able to fast forward, but I should have saved myself about an hour and a half of pain and just been like, wow, the Von Traps were more entertaining, that type of stuff. Well, AA Birmingham wrapped up the regular season, and infielder Sam Antonacci, he had a great final week to their regular season. So much so that my guy Elijah Evans, Future Sox and Just Baseball, he tweeted that he thinks Sam could be the team's leadoff hitter of the future. And you know what? I agree. You know, he's got that hit profile that I think could be the ideal leadoff hitter over, say, Chase Mydroth. You know, Chase Mydroth still potentially has that profile as well with his ability to get on base. And we're seeing, obviously, him hit much better. But where I like Antonacci a little bit is Antonacci's just got a little bit more pop in his bat. And that's not saying much, but there is the potential threat of at least him maybe hitting a little bit more, you know, maybe some more doubles, maybe even putting it over the fence. And remember, today's leadoff hitter is the guy that you want hitting as much as possible, not the old school Tim Raines, draws walks or singles and then steals second, that type of stuff. You know, basically your first and second hitter should be your best hitters now. Sorry, traditionalists, that's just what it is now these days. And I think, you know, when you look at Antonacci and his hit profile, he's got the ability to be a consistent 800 OPS hitter at the top of the order, where Mydroth, that lack of slug is always going to keep his OPS around 700. You know, in Antonacci, and why do I think that? Well, first of all, granted, it is one full regular season. He only played over, you know, about 45 games at AA, but he finishes the regular season with an overall 291, 433, 409 slash line between high A and AA. So the team's number 11 prospect and last year's 5th round pick, he went from hitting 279 at high A to 292 at AA. And that's impressive because remember, AA is now where, you know, you're playing against guys that have legit shots to get to the big leagues. That pitching you're facing is pitching that the organization is acknowledging these are the guys that could potentially help us. You know, that type of stuff. So yeah, to raise his average, that's impressive. Now the OPS did take a dip from 837 to 816 because the slug went from 412 to 381. So, you know, that again speaks to, will he have that pop to get to, you know, that 800 OPS potentially? But man, the on-base percentage, 425 at Winston-Salem, 435 at Birmingham. I mean, talk about modern-day Greek god of walks 3.0. You know, I've called Chase Mydroth the modern-day Greek god of walks 2.0. I mean, I really like Sam Antonacci's on-base percentage number, especially 86 walks to 86 strikeouts. So, kind of shows got a decent eye. It's going to be hard to strike him out. And I get it's one full season in the minors, but that overall hit tool might be, a little bit better in, at the top of the order than, say, Mydroth, where I could see, a potential ideal lineup of Colson Montgomery at short, Mydroth at second, Antonacci at third, with Vargas playing first. And again, you can, give Antonacci a first base glove, give him a shot, see what it is. You should be experimenting with everything. And I'm not discounting Curtis Mead. I just don't know if Curtis Mead is ever going to provide the power that you're hoping for. But you could have Antonacci hitting leadoff and Mydroth hitting ninth to sort of have basically two on-base guys coming up in the same inning later in the game, kind of that old school mentality of basically having two leadoff hitters as the game keeps going, in the third or the fourth, all those innings, kind of what you want to do in terms of why sometimes maybe you might want to have an on-base guy hit ninth instead of just your weakest hitter, that type of stuff. But Antonacci, he's going to wrap up he wraps up the AA regular season on an 8-game hit streak, including a massive home run yesterday. And the Barons, they will get to play a few more games as they are going on to the playoffs. They're going to face the Chattanooga Lookouts, not the Loogies, the Chattanooga Lookouts for a 3-game series. That's going to start tomorrow, although they have not announced who's going to be the starting pitcher. Hagen Smith, his last start, a lot of walks, a lot of strikeouts. So once again, got to work on that command. But the Barons are going to be without top prospect Braden Montgomery. His AA season is over after suffering a fracture in his big toe last week. But the expectation is he is going to be ready in time for the Arizona Fall League, and I think that's huge. Get him some more at-bats, especially now that he's lost a week worth of at-bats, and again, some bonus at-bats, playing some potential playoff baseball there. And I think that he's going to go to the AFL, and maybe he's going to give some hints that there's a long shot that he could, possibly make a push for the opening day roster spot out of spring training. It would not shock me if he does rake, if he does impress like Colson Montgomery did last year, that maybe the White Sox are going to be like, we kind of want this guy to be our opening day right fielder. Although I'm always going to maintain ease rookies into the big leagues. Don't just put this pressure that not only do you have to make the opening day roster and that pageantry and got to produce right away, give them their own standalone game to debut, their own standalone basically way to ease in without this pressure of, if he doesn't, go 2 weeks without a hit, look at how bad it is. Because it does look awful at opening day when guys, when rookies debut and then they kind of struggle, because it's going to happen. Colson Montgomery, remember, he didn't hit a home run until 20 days into his career. And imagine that being at the beginning of the series. We'd be like, oh my gosh, you can't hit, that type of stuff, because it just gets amplified, even though it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that's why I'm not opposed to Braden Montgomery starting, obviously, at AAA Charlotte next year. However, top pitching prospect Noah Schultz season is completely over with. The patella injury he's been dealing with has basically the Sox are shutting him down. So he's going to end up with a disappointing 4.6 ERA overall and a 9.37 ERA at AAA. But remember, Charlotte's stadium plays like a bandbox there. But he's not going to go to the Arizona Fall League. And the other thing is, don't worry about the massive ERA again at AAA Charlotte, because I've talked about it. He's just got to figure out that command, because his whip was 1.67. Obviously, it was disappointing, but he's just got to get those long limbs all up in sync like it was last season, because we've seen him dominate. He's just got to get used to a more consistent and bigger workload. And I'm actually kind of fine that he's not going to pitch the Arizona Fall League, just because it is geared more towards hitters. The only reason why it's a downside is you just would have liked to see him get some more innings, because he only threw 73 this season. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night, every game, every night until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with a chat about the pending offseason with White Sox Dave of Barstool Sports. You can leave comments about today's discussion on the community page on YouTube. You can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, or you can leave them on X, formerly Twitter, at Lockdown Sox or at Todd J. Dub. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.